What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the 40K Cafe, and thank you, 12ths, for the request. As we know it, during the Great Crusade, the Primarchs and their legions had these massive crusading fleets, and the Primarchs would lead these fleets from their own flagships. But as war and time would go on, as we know, the Horus Heresy would kick off, and the post-Heresy, whatever happened to the Primarchs' flagships? We are going to go in order, and starting with the Invincible Reason, the flagship of the Dark Angels. This vessel has seen more than its fair share of battles, partaking in all of the Great Crusade, the Horus Heresy, and even the fall of Caliban. And just as the Dark Angels have endured, the Invincible Reason also endures to this day. It still operates as the flagship for the Dark Angels alongside the Rock itself. Next, we have the Pride of the Emperor, the former flagship of the Emperor's children. And you heard right, former. The only reason for that, though, is because in the more recent lore, nobody knows what happened to the Pride of the Emperor. Its last sighting and recollection of point would be the moment during the Great Scouring where Guilliman and Fulgrim faced off, leaving Guilliman mortally wounded. But this battle also resulted in the Pride of the Emperor being crippled and left there. So since then, it has been referenced again. Next, we have the Iron Blood, the flagship of the Iron Warriors in Perturabo. Like many of the other flagships of the Traitors, it did manage to make its way to Terra, and the last visible record that we have of it is it leaving the Siege of Terra. In typical Iron Warriors fashion, they went, completed what it needed to do, and then left. And since then, the Iron Blood hasn't been seen again. Next, we have the flagship of the White Scars and Jagatai Khan. Its last date of service can be found in 011 M31. This flagship met its end in an attempt to eliminate Mortarion and his legion. The Swordstorm was used as bait while Mortarion boarded the vessel, and the White Scars would set its reactors to overload. The vessel self-destructed, but not before Mortarion could escape. Since then, the White Scars ended up taking up the Lance of Heaven as their new flagship. Next, we have the flagship of Leman Russ, the Harathnical. Its last known sighting was during the moment where Leman Russ took the flagship to attack the Vengeful Spirit, the flagship of Horus Lupercal. Amidst this battle against the arch-traitor, the Harathnical was severely damaged, but the Space Wolves were able to escape. Its status of service and whereabouts since then have been unknown. Next, we have the flagship of Rogel Dorn, the Phalanx. This immense fortress has been in service to the Imperium since the Great Crusade and still in current years. Though, to be honest, in the recent canon, it was severely damaged during the 13th Black Crusade and nearly crippled. But since then, thanks to the assistance of the Legio Custodes and ancient technology, it has been repaired and reinstilled into service. Next, we have the flagship known as the Nightfall from the Night Lords. This flagship, just like the Legion, is covered in blood. Not just because of the treacheries it committed, but also the beating that it has taken. It was severely damaged and almost destroyed during the Thramis Crusade, but under new leadership after the disappearance of the Night Haunter, it would make its way to the Siege of Terra. And this, to my knowledge, is the last records of its appearance. Next, we have the Red Tier, the flagship of the Blood Angels, and its last known location was at the Siege of Terra, but defending the edge of the system from the traitorous forces. Since then, there has been no records of it. Next, we have the Fist of Iron of the ever so creative Iron Hands. This flagship actually didn't get a lot of attention during the Horus Heresy, as when Fulgrim turned traitor and tried to convert Ferrus Manus, those conversations would turn sour and Fulgrim would ultimately damage the ship to the point where it was nearly scuttled. For the remainder of the heresy, the Veritas Ferrum ended up operating as the temporary flagship for the Iron Hands. Up next, we have the Conqueror being the flagship of the World Eaters. For this vessel, after the Siege of Terra, it kind of fell into myth, reappearing every now and then, and rumors circulating its appearance. But in current lore, we can say for certain that it is still around, as it has made its appearance during the 13th Black Crusade, and is still in current operation under Cossalax the Forsworn. I think that's how you say his name. Next, we have the Macragge's Honor, the flagship of the Ultramarines, which has seen many battles to this day, even at one point being captured by the traitors known as the Red Corsairs, but it was eventually recaptured by the Loyalists and even re-outfitted to accommodate the newly revived Primarch Rabute Guilliman. Mortarion's flagship, known as the Endurance, was heavily corrupted by the forces of Nurgle. It's currently still in operation to this day and serves as Mortarion's flagship, which he did use to harass all of the realm of Ultramar. Magnus the Red's flagship, known as the Photep, has made actually very few appearances, supposedly once at the Triumph of Olenor, also making an appearance at the Council of Nicaea, and even eventually at the Siege of Terra, but like many flagships, this would be the last time we make note of it. Now for the flagship with probably the most reputation in history, the Vengeful Spirit, which we know served as the flagship for the arch-traitor Horus, went all the way to the Siege of Terra, made appearances during the Black Crusades, was eventually severely damaged, and then finally in current lore was repaired with the assistance of Vastor, and Abaddon would later use it during the Arcs of Omen campaign. Moving on to the Wordbearers, the Fidelitas Lex would serve as their flagship up until the Shadow Crusades. During the Shadow Crusades of the Heresy, they would encounter many forces of the Ultramarines, to which it would eventually meet its end over Nuceria. And that took place in the book Betrayer, but if I remember correctly, I do know that the Fidelitas Lex eventually made an appearance at the Siege of Terra, which I'm not sure how that happened, but I think I need to reconfirm this. The information that we have on the Salamander's flagship is very little, as pretty much anything following the Dropsite Massacre is unknown. If we were to make any safe assumptions, it was probably destroyed. Then we have the Shadow of the Emperor of the Raven Guard, which this would meet a very similar fate and was confirmed to be destroyed by the Terminus Est at the Dropsite Massacre. And then finally, we have the Alpha and or the Beta of the Alpha Legion. Any records of the flagships of the Alpha Legions have been very unreliable, as after the Battle of Pluto during the Horus Heresy, it would disappear and it wouldn't be seen again, at least with, again, reliable sources. So as you can see, many of these flagships and very powerful vessels have either been destroyed or missing. But this is the fate of all of them that I can find, and I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thanks as always guys for listening. Drop a comment if there's anything you guys want to hear about next, and as always, remember to follow for more.